access the data. I think the key thing that you're trying to do when you're trying to get analysis done is working out a way of getting through that mold, that mountain, contaminants and molding. You've got to be able to sort your data. Okay, so sorting the text, like I said, this is a very kind of classic method. In the old days, you used to do it by pulling out each article of the text, and over time people used index cards. So you could pull out all the themes and bits of text related to them on index cards, and then you can resort that and you can create kind of systems with it. And I think the reason posters work so well is actually you're doing something pretty similar. But I'll talk about some of the reasons why I think there's value in doing it this way. There's some really useful material out there if you do want to know more about these methods. Grounded theory is probably the one that most people talk about. This book by Cathy Schmidz is a good starting point for that. So the basic point for grounded theory is that your theory emerges from the data. So you start at the ground level with the data, and you don't bring ideas from outside into it. The idea is that you keep working that theory until you can account for all of the data. So everything in your theory should be something that exists within the data you have, and if you add a case, extra data that changes that theory, you then need to go back and change the theory and adapt it. So you can say all of your theory is related to empirical circumstances. There's something of an assumption underpinning this that it's possible to build an underlying theory, that everything is discoverable. So that's probably the point that I depart from grounded theory a little bit. I'm not sure that that's really something that you can argue. It's a philosophical question. But I think what it means for me is that you use grounded theory pragmatically as a way of saying how can you keep the data as kind of alive in your process as possible. How can you always be able to go back and find the quote when you're arguing something? How can you say which case this came from? And importantly, how can you say it happened in this case, but it wasn't the same in this case? So what you're doing with this is you are using this coding, so these highlights or these little themes that are emerging from the data, as a way of gathering all the instances of a particular phenomenon. So every time somebody is mentioned in your study about their attitudes to accessing the product on a mobile phone, you're able to find all of those instances again. And what this means is once you've got your text organized this way, you can go back to it and you can rethink it. The coding is also an analytical process. So as you're finding themes in the data and identifying them, you're able to see those emerge, and you're also able to refine them. So if you see your points about mobiles, references to mobiles emerging in the beginning with people just talking about it, but you start to see a pattern emerge, you can rename that code, and all the new instances of it that emerge are starting to be shaped to look more like an idea or a concept that's related to it. So that might be that it's negative or positive, or it might be that people have an exploratory attitude to mobiles, whatever the case may be. There's an important aspect to this that you need to, essentially this is the process of interpreting the data. So it's really important to kind of know how you're doing the interpretation. So some form of memoing is really important. Essentially this is kind of collecting your thoughts and tracking your thoughts of the decisions that you're making as you analyze the data. So at the point at which your code or your theme about attitudes to mobile moves to something which is more specific, you need to kind of make a note about that, so you can argue why you made that choice. Also, if that again is, those memos are also logged with your data. So when I want to make the argument that actually this particular theme has this type of meaning, I can then go back and reference the data that they came from. That's a really useful thing to be able to do. This is another book reference, Pat Baisley, Qualitative Data Analysis with in vivo. So I'm going to run through quickly some of the software that you can use for doing this if you want to do it in a kind of more structured software-led way. This is a really good book because it's actually quite pragmatic. So it's talking about doing it with in vivo, which is one of the well-known packages. But the whole book is designed around how you make pragmatic choices about structuring your data. It's full of really good tips like do a run through your data and just collect all the instances where people talked about mobile phones in one go, without necessarily building it up into a conceptual theme. Because you can build the conceptual themes up in a layer afterwards. It's really useful to just take a cut of all of your data where people talk about mobiles. And so there's lots of really good pragmatic advice to do that in this book. So the data grids, for me, this is really just a really pragmatic tool. Can you start to limit the amount of data that you're actually having to look at? I think there's this book is pretty good at data grids, but I think it maybe goes a little bit too far in kind of forcing you to use a particular structure to the way that you're doing. But this is the classic book on this kind of data grid method, Miles and Human qualitative data analysis. But if you're looking for something which is more about finding a shorter way to get the data, Jaimes and Jaimes' book, Qualitative Research Practice, describes a method that they have called framework. Framework works essentially by saying, create this data grid and populate it right away with your quotes. And then as you iterate through, every iteration you do of looking at that data, you just gradually become more and more abstract and use it. You can use something like Excel, and you can get that thematic grid agreed almost beforehand. You can design your data collection to fit into the framework. But what I wanted to do quickly is just run through some of the software that's available to do this. I tend to use software to do it, but it's taken me quite a long time to get fast in it. And I've also inflicted, it really is inflicting, there's a lot of software, it's a massive infliction. Inflicted all these different softwares on myself. And so it's useful, I think, just to have a bit past some of that. So this is Atlas TI. I do hear this recommended a lot. All of the software tends to be Windows-based. They have Mac versions all coming in. The big three all have Mac versions coming this year, so it'll be interesting to see if they're getting better. That's not something fun. This is NVivo. NVivo is another big name in this space. A lot of university qualitative departments will have NVivo or Atlas. Those tend to be the big two. This is a tool called Max QDA. This is the one that I've kind of found myself using in the end. The reason for that is largely that it's quite quick to actually go through the process of working with text. So the process of working with the software is essentially taking each of the transcripts of the interviews, highlighting bits of text that relate to a particular theme that you're seeing emerge, and creating a code that you can then attach to the next instance of that text. What that means is that when you finish doing all that coding, you can go and click on that particular theme, that particular code, and bring up all the data that's related to that particular theme. This is really useful to be able to do for the points 3 months later when somebody comes to you and says, what did that data say about this particular issue? Give me 2 minutes and I can pull it out of the data. So not reading through transcripts every time you need to look up what somebody said about a particular theme. A lot of these softwares also do server-based systems, so you can have multiple people analyzing the text. But I find it's often something that actually somebody just needs to sit down and do. So the drawback of all three of these is that they're pretty expensive. They're about $1,000 for the software, so it's not something you probably need to talk somebody into buying. I think it's worth the investment, but it is something you need to think about and perhaps try it out. So there are free versions of similar things. This is a thing called Hyper Research. They're all terrible between you and me. This is a thing called Deduce. This is an online tool. It's pretty good. I'm not convinced. Again, this is something that's a really repetitive task that you need to do, going through and taking these things, and I'm not convinced about the performance of a web system for it. I find it very frustrating. this is Max Keeler, the Windows version, and you can see essentially the text that you've got, you highlight it, you add the codes to it, and you can, if you select a code, you can bring up all the instances of it. So what this allows you to do is to go through and having chopped up the data into only the things that are relevant to the particular thing you mentioned. You were talking about only selecting things that were of importance. This is a way of cutting all of that text out without in a kind of non-linear, non-destructive way. So essentially, that's the kind of benefit of doing this. And just what I'm sort of so I think these tools are not really that great, but there is an advantage in using them in this non-linear, non-destructive fashion. You can't really go back and query your post-it notes when you've done a post-up session. That session's it, and then everything's live. It's much easier to actually craft analysis and really put time into thinking and deepening the relevance of the analysis when you have the tools to kind of go back and query the data like this. But there may be some forms of program. I'm trying a project at the moment to use Evernote to do this. So we put all of the texts into notes in Evernote, and then as a team we're able to code them up using the tags. There's some drawbacks of this. You don't quite get the non-destructiveness that you get from software that's built for the purpose. But if your texts aren't too massive, it's possible to do it. And at least you're getting some of that structure into your data. So you've got a way of everybody being able to look at the data, cut it in different ways. So what are all the people over 50 saying about your product? You can recut your data to get that perspective really quickly. Very quickly, just stress also the kind of soft outputs, the things like models. A lot of the time, these don't even go anywhere. They just become things that the design team are able to use to get their heads around things. And that can be incredibly important. That's almost sometimes the most important part of a project is just finding ways of creating some shared understandings amongst the team. And that can also be things like process models. So just taking all of the bits of understanding that you've got from different people describing things in different ways and being able to describe how the system actually works. A lot of the time, your client, no one person in your client's organization will actually have this full model. So just building these things up can be a really, really useful tool to help people understand what's going on. This is just another example of that. So, one of the things that I think is really important with these things is to kind of think of them as different resolutions. So they all take a little bit more time, but you can, if you think of them as resolution, you can start to sell the resolution to the clients as something that they need to make a decision about paying for, and then they need to own that decision. So if the client is looking for this level of robustness from post-ups, they're not going to get it. They need to pay a different price. If they want the robustness, they need to pay the price for you to do the work. By getting them to own that, it helps you to be a little bit more forceful about what you can be confident in claiming from your data and what is a stretch. So one of the kind of key benefits of doing deeper analysis, I think, is more robustness. And this is robustness out of the analysis process, not necessarily out of just the data collection process. So, these are the last slides, so I can finish really quickly. Okay, so we're doing, you say case analysis, you say 3 out of 4, you never say 75%. Follow the divergent cases, stay close to the data. The benefit of this is that you can look the boss in the eye and you can kind of be really confident in what you're saying. And it's quite pragmatic, so you get to be able to work and rework your themes, memo as you go, keep returning to your data. It's one of the reasons why I think video is quite tricky, because you make your choice about your good-looking cuts, and then all the analysis kind of runs off those. And just to argue that to do this, you fight for budget for benefit analysis. You should get the clients to own the fidelity, so that resolution, get the clients to understand if they're paying for different levels of resolution. And just talk in terms of kind of cases and instances, because you can go back to the case and you can say this came exactly from there. So you're not saying this is an overarching theme, this is everything that it means. And that's, thank you. increased level of robustness out of it. A lot of the time I do this in a kind of guerrilla way. I'll put my hand up and admit it. I will be able, if I need to do it with a large team, I'm not necessarily going to recommend this. But if I know that I'm going to be doing a lot of that crunch analysis by myself, actually I can do it almost as fast as the post-doc work. So I think the key thing to argue is that it's not about the method that you use to do it necessarily, but not wasting the data, basically. So if I can say that I know what's in the data, and I'm able to argue that I can return to it later and I can re-query different things, then I can create a little bit of space. And I find once I'm able to create a little bit of space just to get the kind of initial coding done, actually I'll start to get efficiencies down the line. I can do things like go back to the data to query it again. So I'm saving time later with iteration 2. Iteration 2 builds on this iteration because we haven't lost anything. It's all there. It's all there in a raw format. I can go back to something 6 months later and get it just as quickly. So I tend to argue with my clients that you're kind of investing a little bit in doing it the right way, and then they can pay off later. The other thing is it does speed up if you do it a lot. And there's a couple of things that you can do to speed it up. Always get transcripts put on your expenses budget, and the transcripts are amazing to do yourself, but I'm willing to bet not many people here do that. So if you're a purist who say you have to do all the write-up yourself, I'm arguing that you need to find a way to put more time into analysis. You're not going to have all of it, so you need to choose where, and I think coding is more valuable than transcribing, personally. If you can get that done straight away, you can go back and do this later if you need to. So you can get quick and dirty, but then you can come out. It's a bit of investment, I think, to do it at first, but I really think, I don't find that it takes that much longer once you've got a kind of system set up for doing it. Because you almost start to write the analysis yourself as you go. And it's because it's this kind of close to the data analysis, you've reworked that theme 10 times as you've seen things emerge through the data. So the actual process itself is the analysis. You need to experiment with how you kind of build it into your team. But I find if you don't have to describe your analysis process that well and you can just kind of get on with it and do it, it doesn't take that much longer.
I was really interested in your point about that kind of fidelity part of using that as a way of talking to someone about how much effort, how much money they need to put in. Because I've always talked about that more in relation to kind of mixed periods. That the less time you spend, the more it's just description. The more it's just, I'll tell you the facts of what I saw. And actually, the further up the pyramid you want to go, that's what actually takes the time. And almost always, whenever we do anything with a client, they actually, after the first little while, they're actually bored with the description. And they just keep asking you, well, what's the other thing? And you go, well, that's what actually takes the time.
The arguments I don't think are about trying to sell detail of analysis to clients. It's about trying to argue for the value of crafting the results. So it's the thing you get in the first pass is never the best description. It's never necessarily the thing that resonates the most with your clients. It takes a little bit of time to craft these into. The major output of my work is often design principles. So it's trying to craft these into things that are stories that will travel in the client's organization. That takes time because you very rarely get it in the first pass. So in order to do that crafting, you need to be able to kind of go back and query the data, and you need to have that kind of grounding in the data. This is a kind of way of doing it. And I think arguing to the clients about that, the kind of the value or the quality of the end result is much more helpful. It's arguing for an extra day or two perhaps to get this level of analysis done. It's arguing for the transcripts, which is, if there's 10 interviews, that's another grand on the expenses budget. So it's arguing these little pragmatics that get you going. And if you've argued all of that up front and you've said, we can add it $2 grand extra, but you get this high level of fidelity out, usually it's not that bad. People go for it. Especially if you argue the transcripts versus your time